right now joining us is Christian Datoc, White House correspondent for the Washington Examiner. Good morning, Christian. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Julie. Yeah, no problem. Happy to join you guys.
So Trump had quite the rally. I shouldn't say, it was like, I feel like it was the same exact energy level. It was the same humor. He puts on a great show. Tell us what your thoughts were before we get into the details.
Yeah, well, I was in Michigan yesterday with the president, part of the White House's new pool that they've stood up after taking it over from the White House Correspondents Association. And I'm going to push back on you a little bit because, the rally, the attendees and the atmosphere, the playlist, that was all the same. But I actually thought President Trump was a little rusty. Seems like he's been spending too much time in the White House and not enough out with the people across the country. But he got back into speed pretty quick. And, he was doing his patented weave for about 2 hours. It was longer than expected. I can confirm that White House staff were a little worried that we were going to miss departure and he could potentially miss viewing his ABC interview on the way home.
Oh dear!
But it was a high energy speech for sure, and I think it kind of really symbolized where the Republican Party is right now. Of course, in Macomb County, Michigan, that's a hot county, not just in the Wolverine State, but really across the country, and it is a determinant of where elections can go, not only in the past few cycles, but I expect over the next few as well.
Yeah, and, it was interesting that, Christian, you were there. And part of the reason, right, is that the White House took control of the press pool, got rid of the two permanent seats that the Associated Press had, and now they have a seat there that's rotating between the wire services and other print outlets like yours, which I think makes everybody happy with the exception of the AP.
Yeah, so Hans, we at the Washington Examiner, we were in the travel pool already, but the way you mentioned it, of course, that court ruling in favor of the AP basically ordered the White House to either let the Associated Press back in or essentially bar all the wires from these rotations because they just said all of these outlets have to be treated the same. Now, I don't think the wire services are happy. They're in all of these spaces, whether it's traveling with the president on Air Force One or covering some of these events in Washington. They're not in there with the same type of frequency that we've seen over the past several decades. But for other outlets like myself, it gives us more opportunity to get FaceTime with the president or to travel on some of these events. And it also opens up the door to some new outlets that weren't in the Correspondents Association already. It's been a little bumpy, but I think the White House is starting to figure out how to get this thing going. It is a huge administrative undertaking trying to wrangle all of these hundreds of media outlets, and I think they might have underestimated that in the beginning when they first announced this policy, but they seem to be getting their feet under them now that we're through 100 days in office.
So I want to talk about Governor Whitmer and some other issues that went on, and again, there were parts that were so amusing, but there is a serious reason they were there, and that is to talk about this new fighter mission at Selfridge Air Force Base. Talk to us a little bit about what's going on there in this new mission.
Yes, of course. Well, the president announced it. One, there is a new commission for the base. There were concerns that it would be shuttered heading into 2026. And this is an issue which Governor Whitmer, she had been at the White House twice already since January to meet with President Trump. And again, someone like Gretchen Whitmer, you wouldn't necessarily expect her to be the first Democrat to reach across the aisle and try and work with the Trump administration on issues where they align. And I think President Trump was cognizant of that fact because he was tearing into Democrats per usual in both of his speeches on Tuesday. But he acknowledged Whitmer, and he did it in a way that I thought felt sincere and had gratitude in it. Again, for being someone who he does not agree with politically, but when it comes to making sure that jobs stay in communities across the country, and on what really is a nonpartisan issue,
Right.
defense and making sure our National Guard has the technologies and manpower needed to protect the country, they were in total lockstep agreement there. So it was an interesting event, and you could tell the guardsmen at the base certainly were happy that they weren't going to be needing to move.
Yeah, really quickly, I actually am an idiot. I thought it was Kristi Noem the entire time. I was sitting there watching that rally, and I thought that Whitmer was Kristi Noem. She sort of had that Kristi, you got to admit, she kind of had that Kristi Noem look going on with the baseball cap and the long hair. But let's talk about Whitmer a little bit. She met him it was at the Air Force Base, but she met him as he came down Air Force One. And then, she was in that lineup, and then he invited her up to speak, and she said, I didn't really, she didn't put a blue folder in front of her face, but she didn't look totally comfortable. What was your impression?
I think you pretty much nailed it, Julie. Of course, I was actually in the Oval Office when Governor Whitmer, got caught on camera right. holding the folder over her face. And I do think, I'm going to be totally honest, her line, I wasn't expecting to speak, that might have been, perhaps planned or in an attempt to distance herself a little bit from President Trump.
Right.
But no, she handled this situation significantly better. And of course, she got out of her meetings with the president what she wanted, the saving of Selfridge Air National Guard Base. But, just as I said, the president was gracious for Governor Whitmer for reaching out in good faith. I think she showed the same type of deference to the president. Again, it wasn't political. She thanked him for coming. She thanked the other Republican lawmakers who were there with her, local lawmakers from Michigan, for coming together on this issue and not letting politics divide us. And again, just looking after our men and women in uniform. It was a fun event, and it did sort of set the tone for that campaign-style rally that we had later on Tuesday evening.
It was quite a contrast from Governor Pritzker of Illinois, who's calling for violence and revolution in the streets.
It was, and I'll leave the 2028 horse race jockeying to potential primary candidates, but I think one thing that we've seen, Hans, is that Democrats through this first 100 days really haven't found a united lane to try and oppose Donald Trump. You have folks like Whitmer or Senator John Fetterman who are, quite frankly, welcoming President Trump with open arms on issues, again, where they think they can work together. It's very different from his first term in office. Meanwhile, you have folks like Pritzker who are deciding to take the Bernie Sanders or the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez route. They are going, further to the left on the political spectrum.
Right.
And they are, trying to mobilize their base, which, let's be honest, after the November election, the quote-unquote resistance, there was a major enthusiasm problem there. I can just tell you on the ground in Washington, compared to the first inauguration of President Trump, it seems like these people had sort of packed it in and had given up hope. So Democratic leaders are not only trying to fight with each other to position themselves ahead of 2028, they're really trying to, tell their base and, voters in all wings of the party, look, we could still be a viable option here. This isn't over, even though Donald Trump is fundamentally remaking the federal government in the image that he and other conservatives have called for decades now.
Yeah. Christian, we got to leave it there. Thank you so much for that rundown of that rally. It was great to hear.
No problem, y'all. Thanks again for having me.